Lovely to meet everyone who I haven't met before. My name is Casey, pronouns are she, her, and I'm Youth Engagement Manager here at Frontline. So essentially, I manage all of our work with young people, and a large part of that is our Young People Advisory Board, which I'll speak a little bit more about. So I'll hand over to our lovely panelists today. Tegan, do you want to go first?
So, hello everyone, nice to meet you today. Thank you for coming along. I'm Tegan, I'm 24 years old. I'm an adoptee who was adopted at the age of 4 years old after 2 years in care. I had some social work intervention throughout my childhood to support me and my family to navigate things like the education system, therapeutic support, as well as a few other challenges we faced along the way because adoption, of course, is lifelong. I'm currently a lived experience consultant and advocate and trainer based on my lived experience of both adoption but also neurodiversity, which means I do a whole range of roles around those lived experiences. And I'll pass you over now.
Hi everyone, thank you all for being here. My name's Oliver and I'm 20 years old as well. And essentially, I am a young person who also advocates for underrepresented groups and topics. And I'm a Frontline Youth Advisory Board member. I come from a background of being care experienced, living in semi-independent accommodations, and also I'm now currently living on my own in my second independent flat. And essentially, I just want to be able to help create better futures for young people and children, and also empower communities as well, all over the UK and hopefully internationally as well. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you both for your introductions to yourselves. So, for anyone who doesn't know too much about Frontline, I'll give you a very brief introduction to Frontline. So, lots of people may know us for our work training social workers, which is a really important part of what we do. But as a children's charity, that isn't all that we do. So, our main mission and aim is to support young people at risk of harm by essentially supporting and uplifting the services and the professionals who work with them and equipping them with skills that they're able to use. So as well as training social workers, we also do lots in the leadership space, thinking about leadership training for people around kind of team manager level. We have a new arm in our business development. So we're now starting to offer bespoke packages for local authorities and other organisations who are helpful there. As well as that, we have a large group now of alumni social workers, of which I'm one, who have trained through one of our programmes. And we offer lots of things in that area. So things from innovation, offering support to people with new innovative ideas, supporting them with getting off the ground, additional information, resources, and funding for some people at the end of that, as well as lots around kind of practice development for social workers, not just social workers who have trained with us, but more widely. And those things are also open to other aligned professionals as well. So people within the youth workspace, people who work with children and young people potentially in school capacities. So look out for those. And just to speak a little bit more about our Young People Advisory Board too. So I will at some point post a poster in the chat that people are able to have a little bit of a look at. But our Young People Advisory Board is a fantastic aspect of the work that we do. It's a group currently consisting of 9 care experienced young people, all of with a range of different experiences, as Oliver and Tegan have touched on. And essentially, that board is there to advise us, support us, give us advice, insights into actually what are we kind of doing well, what are the things we should be focusing on, what are the things actually we could be doing a little bit better, and kind of involved in sessions like today, providing professionals, other people who work with young people with kind of direct information and insights as well. So it's a really fantastic board. If I do say myself, obviously it's a big part of what I do, but the work is really special to us here at Frontline. We are currently recruiting. So if anyone does think of a young person who is between the ages of 18 to 25 who they think could sort of really sort of give to this board, but also benefit from some of the benefits as well, things like mentoring, networking and experiences, etc. I will let you know how you can get more involved with that. But kind of enough about us and about sort of Frontline as a whole. I'm sure you've all joined to hear more from Oliver and Tegan. So we'll now kind of move into our panel discussion. The focus will be on learning from mistakes, which I think is an area that isn't often kind of spoken about. It's not often included in kind of social work and youth work and sort of sort of general teaching on syllabuses. It's a topic we really wanted to shed some light on today. So I will be asking Tegan and Oliver some questions, and they'll be kind of sharing their responses from personal experiences of others, things that they've seen. And then if we have enough time at the end as well, we will be opening the floor to some questions. So with that, we'll get started with the first question. So the first question, when we're thinking about this idea of learning from mistakes, is kind of thinking a little bit about some of the mistakes themselves. What are some of the preventable mistakes that you think social workers often make with children and young people? And why do you think it's important for us to highlight these mistakes?
Thank you. So I think when I was thinking about this question, I think a key mistake that feels is still commonly made in social work practice is not valuing the child or young person's voice. And this can come in multiple forms, including reports not having quotes or comments from a young person, elements such as their wishes and feelings. Another is the idea that a young person or a child is too young to have a voice or understand the topics that are being discussed. However, I feel everyone has opinions from a young age. It's just how we expect it to be expressed and the depth. For example, with a young child, they may not have comprehension or even words. However, they may make facial expressions or emotionally react to something, which is a form of communication. I still see this mistake time and time again in the work I do around adoption, or they haven't discussed with a child what's happening as they're too young. I once had a social worker had written a report that this 4-year-old, despite development delays, had been explained to her younger sister they would be separated and what that meant for both of them. However, when we asked what had been discussed with her, when her workers came to the panel, they insisted she was too young for those, even when I challenged with this example. I also experienced not being told what was going on when I was adopted at the age of 4 years old. My mums have always commented, as have my foster carers, that they could see the cogs turning in my head and I knew something was going on, but social workers deemed me too young to understand. This was a massive mistake, as whilst I can't remember how I felt then, I'm sure it left me feeling more confused and isolated. Why are all these grown-ups discussing things and me being excluded? Social workers make the mistake of not remembering age is just one factor to indicate a child's capacity. There's also others, such as life experiences, and a lot of care experienced individuals have been through some form of trauma, and that may have meant they had to act beyond their age, so are more aware of the world around them than their peers. The mistakes social workers make matter because a lot of them are avoidable, honestly, or should be rare consequences. Whilst we respect social workers as human, which means we make mistakes, the ones we talk about today happen more often than they should. Even the small mistakes, but also the larger ones, can cause real harm that has a lasting impact. You may remember the words a social worker said to you, or when an action wasn't remembered as you were let down in that moment. Social workers are in our lives to care and protect. A lot of mistakes are the opposite of this, even if they are not done intentionally. They can make you feel invalidated and not how you feel about the world around you.
Thank you, Tegan, and lots of important points that you touched on there. And I think a massive one that sometimes can happen is people so busy in kind of what it is that they should be doing that actually they're forgetting to be collaborative, and they're forgetting that actually even if you've got, as you said, a child who is a small child, that doesn't mean that they don't have a voice. It might be that the way that you get that voice looks a bit different, but it doesn't mean that they don't have a voice that shouldn't be considered. So thank you. And Oliver, will come to you for your thoughts on that question.
Thank you. And also there's probably like a few points as well that I'll probably like interlink with Tegan's point. But yeah, so in terms of like the preventable mistakes that social workers make, what I would say is like definitely miscommunication as well. A lot of the time, social workers are supposed to be like, in terms of like the quality that they're supposed to have, is being able to communicate very well with young people and also the people that they'll be working with, because obviously it's a multi-agency in the sense that they'll be working with a lot of different organizations in multidisciplinary teams. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, I'm assuming you would, but it's basically just a bunch of different professionals that are working together with a child or young person, and possibly even as well regarding their care. It could be like hospital stuff, but in the sense of health and social care, it would be more so around adoption. It would be around like care, like their living accommodation and things like that. So yeah, so because they need to have communication sometimes. Although this is true, like they may be miscommunicative with with young people, and just people just letting them know when things are happening. So that's, for example, like I think maybe like within my experiences, I haven't been told about like any legal processes that's happening, or things like just like anything to do with my mental health, essentially, or like any assessments as well. And I guess like an example of this would be like one of my social workers were doing a basically I was going into placement essentially, and they told the staff that I had autism, and I didn't actually know that because they didn't actually communicate it across, and also just them not being able to say things truthfully sometimes as well, or maybe admitting certain things as well. Another like preventable mistake as well that I would say is like leaving without a goodbye, and this is also something I've touched on as well in learning from mistakes, as I created a learning from mistakes resource as well with the help of Casey as well, and also other parts of the team as well in frontline. So like social workers will most of the time with a lot of young people leave without saying goodbye, or leave without actually saying that you're going to get a new social worker. So it's actually a very, very sad thing, because you will feel neglected, kind of like the same kind of feelings as well that I think Tegan touched on as well. You'll feel neglected, you'll feel not like you won't feel like you're supported. You may feel like, you know, they don't actually care about you because of the way they have kind of like gone about what they're doing within their, you know, like their professional capacity. You would expect better from social workers, and I feel like that's one of the sad parts of it as well. And yeah, it's just like disregarding young people, kind of as Tegan said as well. And I would also say like a lot of social workers, they do focus on like admin paperwork, and instead of more so focusing on the young person and checking in with them. And that's kind of the last few things I would say. But so like they can easily, I would say, because you have your phone on you 24/7, kind of like with me as well, you'd be able to like probably just send a quick message to all your young people, just a copy and paste, like, hey, how are you? If there's anything that's wrong or any issues you have, just let me know, and just copy and paste it to like the 20 young people, so at least they have an in to be able to talk about what issues they have, instead of feeling like, okay, I'm a burden, like no one wants, I have to reach out before my social worker can reach out to me. So I feel like those are some things that can easily be rectified as well, but it's just a thing where it's kind of disregarded or like left kind of like to the back burner. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. So again, really important points there around communication. And I think what is also really lovely is you've provided some solutions there as well. You've provided something that's pretty quick, simple, light touch that people are able to do there to support, as well as a massive issue that we know within the profession with turnover of social workers, the importance of actually how do those relationships end, and the impact on young people when that's not considered and thought about properly. So thank you both. So I'll come back to you, Oliver, for this next question. What are mistakes, and you sort of started to answer this, but what are mistakes that a social worker has made when working with you? Did they rectify them? And in those situations, what do you think the social worker could have done instead?
Right, thank you. So yeah, so kind of just to touch on the kind of like the anecdote that I said as well. So yeah, so that was one thing. So like not telling me about my autism as well. I was actually kind of shocked, and not in the sense that you think like, oh, I just never thought I had autism. I actually thought I did, but I just never told anyone about it. So it came as a shock to me that I had a diagnosis all of a sudden. Just to create like a bit of like a little bit of a backstory on this. I was actually admitted to a psychiatric ward and for 4 months, and then I came back and I ended up moving to a semi-independent, so like a 16 to 18 semi-independent accommodation. So that's basically where like you you're with a few different people, like a few different housemates. You have your own rooms, and luckily for me, I did have my own ensuite as well. You have ensuites in each room. So yeah, so basically my social worker they didn't tell me about this. They didn't talk to me about this. They just told a staff member with this. So yeah, what they could have done to like rectify it was just more so talk to me about it first before we go in, and just tell me like, oh, by the way, Oliver, I do know actually that you have a autism diagnosis. Did you know about this? Or like, by the way, about your autism. Just even talking to me about the autism, even if they didn't think I knew that I had it, at least then I wouldn't have found out in a setting that was with other staff members. And then also, yeah, so sometimes as well, you have like mistakes as well with paperwork as well. Sometimes you may not feel like they may have certain things wrong as well, but also again communication as well. They may not have actually talked to you about certain things, so they may just say things to other professionals or that you may have not wanted to have been said, or disclosed with other people as well, and different things like that as well. So I think that's also like a few things as well. But in terms of rectifying that, I would just say, yeah, just making sure that you're communicative. That's one of the basic to me qualities that a social worker should have, especially since social is in the name. Like you have to have good working qualities as well to be able to work with children and young people. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. And yeah, I think it's unfortunately that kind of mistake in terms of communication about something, information sharing is one that I feel like I've seen quite a lot. Information being shared in rooms, people aren't aware that it's going to be shared. And I feel like often it happens just because people have not taken the time to actually consider. It might be, for example, that there's a piece of information that a social worker is waiting for, and they've been so consumed with the fact that they're waiting for this and it's now been received that they don't take the time to think about, okay, so what does this mean for the young person? How do I share this with the young person? But like you said, really preventable and avoidable just by having a conversation ahead of time, and talking to you. So thank you for sharing that example with us. And Tegan, I'll come over to you to think about mistakes that social workers maybe made when working with you, how they rectified them and what could have been done instead.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on what your reflections and all of this experiences are. I think it's also just always thinking ahead. Think before you speak, think before you act. It's something we learn from childhood, but actually carry on practicing it throughout adulthood. I think my examples that came to my mind when I was thinking of this question are quite similar in some ways, very different experiences, but similar core themes. So I think one that really sticks out to me is, I think it's something that can't be rectified, but definitely can be learnt from, is the amount of mistakes or inaccuracies in my adoption records. There was information in there that was either very poorly written or didn't make much sense why it was in there. It felt like it was honestly the last thing on someone's to-do list, which for adoption records and for records I'm now seeing feels very invalidating of why my records was given so little care. And actually some of the examples, I remember it said my granddad was terminally ill. This was despite he wasn't, and luckily I could ask my birth father, was your dad ill at that time? And my dad was like, no, don't know where anyone got that idea from. There's a lot of one-liners such as my uncles may be drug dealers. Again, it wasn't even a confirmed thing, it was a may, and I was like, what's this information purpose for? And I feel like it was a massive mistake that my older sister barely got more than 2 lines, and those 2 lines were basically, she lives with grandmother. No exploration of her hobbies, her interests, her likes. It was such a mistake to not build that family picture for me. And there was many other examples. To what degree I could read, because obviously they're highly redacted, and I feel like there's probably a lot more mistakes hidden by that blackness. But I think, as I say, it just left me feeling like no one cared for me or my family. And it hadn't been thought of what it'd be like when I read those records. And I think that was very common at that time, of actually these were the last thing, just getting a child adopted or whatever, end of story. But actually also these mistakes, I'm lucky that I've been able to talk to my birth family about a lot of them and actually get some of it clarified as much as you can. But I know a lot of adoptees with similar quality of reports who haven't got that sort of, can I ask you this question, ability, and actually they're left with these mistakes, not knowing even more so what their story is. And I think, whilst I think that it's changing, I do, as I say, still see quite a lot of errors in records currently, and that can be minor information, but it can be more key information. Sometimes it's just language used, but that in itself is really important. And I think there should be more thought in what they're writing and why. I think also it's not just always on one social worker. A lot of these records, either for those in care or those that are being adopted, are read by multiple professionals. So I think it falls on multiple social workers to read through these records. And actually, if you see an error, actually taking that time to challenge it, if you can, talk to that social worker who's written the report, talk to your manager, talk to whoever you feel is appropriate, and go, this needs to change, not only for now, not only for the judges that might read this and challenge it, because I think more judges are challenging these records that are coming through, but also for the young person that's reading it later in life, because actually those mistakes are massive. But if there isn't a possibility, either because you come to this record later, or the social worker's left, or whatever the reason, can you add a document explaining those mistakes? You might not be able to rectify the information, but can you explain why that record, mistake is there? Or actually, was it a mistake of it, not a mistake of era, but now it's be seen as a mistake? Can you explain that? Because some of the language around neurodiversity, for example, I know has changed. Another mistake I've experienced a lot, I think, is about assumptions around my identity. One example is I had put on an information sheet for a social worker, I'm Irish. This was a feedback form. It's just wanted general information about age, name, ethnicity. I was about 18 years old nearly. The next thing I know, after submitting it, I thought, very simple form, what could go wrong? And I received a call saying I had made a mistake, as my mum's had been put down as white British, so I must have the same ethnicity. I was sat there, a bit bamboozled, honestly, of like, you're making a mistake, because I'm not making a mistake here. And I think what should have been in this situation is just leaving that information be, How can you see that as a mistake if someone puts something on a form? We all make errors on forms, but the likelihood is probably not on that kind of form. And then if she had wanted to, maybe next time she met me, she could have just asked a clarifying question of like, oh, I know you've put a different ethnicity than your adoptive parents, just to help my knowledge. Just, can you explain that a bit? Because, we all have gaps in our knowledge, but actually just calling someone and telling them they've made a mistake, not very appropriate. And instead I had to call, on this call where I was very unhappy and a bit frustrated with her, I'll be honest, I had to then do that explanation whilst I was not happy with them, thinking, well, this is your problem, not my problem, thank you very much. So I think it is just being really careful about accusations when you've made a mistake, that it's not the young person or someone else. And then the last one, I was talking to my adoptive parents about this, and this is a larger mistake, but still had an impact on my life, is social workers, from all accounts, didn't act quick enough in my story. When I read my records, there was a lot of talk about my birth father looking increasingly unwell. I was on a protection order because of my birth mum, but that still means I was a child in need. And they recorded that my dad was increasingly looking ill every time he came in, because I had to come in for check-ins because of my mum, even though I had nothing to do with her. And in the end, the police took action because they believed the social services weren't taking necessary action to protect me. And anyone who knows me, I don't do well with police nowadays. I can't go near them without feeling quite ill, honestly. And I see that as a massive mistake on those social work behalf, because I feel like there's a part of me that wonders actually if they'd taken action when needed, I might have still stayed with my birth family, potentially, if there was that opening. But also it might have not had to come down to blue sirens and police effectively just picking me up and running with me almost, and leaving me with a whole load of trauma there. And I think how that could have been rectified is actually the social workers, and there might have been conversations, but taking more decisive action in those moments of, we can see a child's in need, or a birth parent even is in need, what can we do about that? But actually I think from all accounts I can see, that was never happened, and it was a mistake that cost me and my family a lot, including my adoptive parents, because as incredible as they are, they have to now deal with those impacts of being taken from my birth family and adopted. So yeah.
Thank you, Tegan. And again, in there, some really practical advice. And I love the bit of advice that you gave around, even if you're not the person who wrote those records, if you've noticed that there's discrepancies, things that aren't adding up, things that haven't made sense or been explained, that is something that anyone working with children and young people could go away and could do this afternoon if they're aware of discrepancies, just kind of put in some information there. So thank you again for that practical advice, and lots, I think, for people to think about in terms of, again, practical sort of steps that they can take, ways that they can kind of rectify mistakes, and to your last point, just being more curious, asking more questions, and lots there as well on actually the long-term impact of not doing some of these things. So the long-term impact of not correcting records, of not asking certain questions. So thank you. Our next question thinks about what mistakes do social workers often make when working with people under the LGBTQIA+ umbrella, and what are things social workers could do to improve their support of LGBTQIA+ young people and families? And I'll come to you, Oliver, to share your thoughts on this question.
Right, so some mistakes that I feel like social workers do make with people under the LGBTQIA+ umbrella is actually not honoring their pronouns, their identity, their walk of life, different things like that, basically. So things that just make them who they are today. And that's coming from lived experience in the sense that, like, I'm trans, I'm unlabeled, so I've also had issues where I was saying my pronouns and then people misgendering me, all those kinds of things. I still get that today, unfortunately, but it is a thing that just happens as well, especially in a society that you know we're made to just default, like fall into a default of like binary genders and like binary pronouns and things like that. And yeah, so one mistake that social workers have often make is like misgendering me or using the wrong pronouns, especially in the beginning. But I have seen, like, as well, like in my last few social workers as well, definitely made the effort, which I'm very, very appreciative of. I think that some things that social workers could definitely improve their support towards LGBTQIA+ young and people and families is one, resources. So providing resources, signposting people as well to just to better for there to be better relationships with queer people and queer families, or just queer individual in a household. And also, again, signposting as well to mental health support services. Reason why I say that as well is just because a lot of young people or adults, even people who are queer, they do typically face some kind of like mental health difficulty, issue, condition, and that's one. It could be gender dysmorphia. Gender dysphoria. Now I even forgot the term now. I've said it so long. Gender dysphoria, I believe is gender dysphoria. Yeah, gender dysphoria. So basically, gender dysphoria is like when you just don't feel comfortable in your body. That's basically what it is. So, for example, like you may want, gender affirming surgery, and basically what that is just like being able to have surgery that changes the way your body looks like according to like how your original sex looked like, and that's obviously just to make sure that you feel actually more mentally okay, kind of thing, because obviously your gender is more how you align is more so around to do with your brain, like how you perceive yourself, like how you feel comfortable in yourself, and not necessarily the sex you were born as. So so definitely signposting to mental health support services as well, so they can also get what you call it, on the waiting list to like to have a stock appointment or like other gender identity clinics, although their waiting times are very, very long, which is a whole other topic. But definitely just making the moves to signpost them to these places, so at least they have more resources, awareness, and things like that. And there's actually things that's being done, because when there is actual action, people will feel like, okay, yeah, they do care, instead of like the words, like the whole saying about actions matter more than words, or like I will believe their actions rather than their words. That's kind of like what it is. Like if you do act on it, they can see that you do care about how they're feeling, you do care about how the mental toll that is taken on them, just to try and feel comfortable in their own body. And then for families as well, especially if some families do not necessarily understand, especially if you're from like a more a different kind of cultural background. So for example, if you're Black, if you're Asian, also sometimes as well if you're white, and different things like that, or mixed, there can be kind of like a discrepancy between like know how to support your child, or even sometimes as well there's homophobia, and even personally could be internal homophobia as well that you have to deal with as well. Kind of lost my train of thought now, but it's okay if you come back to me.
Yeah, I was just about to say I can always come to Tegan, and if there's anything else that you think of, then you can just let me know and we can come back afterwards. So we'll come to you, Tegan, for your thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I agree with what Oliver says about pronouns. I was only in a case last week on a fostering panel where I don't know whether I don't think the social workers knew where they were at with the pronouns. They were using the wrong ones the entire time they spoke about the individual. There'd be occasions they'd use the right ones, but then look as confused or like deer in headlights as possible. And it was just very awkward to sit there thinking there's going to have to be a lot of changes in these minutes when it's written up. But also, actually, that's really disrespectful for a young person because they're not there at the panel. But actually, if they were, I think they would be out of this room quickly. And I think I would probably walk with them if they wanted because it's just very disrespectful. I'm also a family member who's witnessed a family member in the care setting experience these mistakes, and on a number of occasions have tried to advocate for them. So my family member was in alternative care, and as a teenager, they started exploring her identity. She said she identified with different pronouns and a certain sexuality. As a family, we respected this exploration and hoped she would be supported in doing so, despite being in Northern Ireland, where those religions aren't always as welcoming to the LGBT community. However, social services clearly told us it was just a phase on multiple occasions and a response to the trauma. She would get over it, so we should all just use her original pronouns, and I wouldn't be willing to advocate for her, such as things as being allowed to wear trousers at school. To me, this was quite shocking mistake, as to me, a social worker should always respect a child or young person's identity, even if it's still being explored. The language was unkind and against what I see as key values, especially advocacy and caring. They've taken a lot away from us as a family, so I'd have hoped they would have properly stepped in to do so. What I feel could have been done differently is rather being in some form of denial about it, actually respect it, advocate for it, and ask if us as family needed any guidance on a subject. Because in some ways, I'd hope social workers, or at least those that are working and caring for these young people, maybe sometimes be more informed on these topics than us.
Thank you, Tegan. And Oliver, was there anything else that came to mind that you wanted to share on the question as Tegan was talking, or anything you wanted to add from your answer?
Thank you. And thank you also Tegan as well. Yeah, so basically just like entitlements, I think yeah, sorry if like I just kind of like go one off because I can't even remember where I like end up in terms of like that bit.
No worries, just say what comes to mind.
So entitlements I think as well is just very, very important. So like social workers making sure that they know with young people what their entitlements are. So like just knowing so telling the young person and the families as well where they can get support, kind of like I was talking about the gender identity clinics and the mental health support, but also letting them know like you can change your default and actually the council could either provide money to help you change that or like providing money as well to get your ID changed, whatever it is. And also there's a thing called like a gender change a certificate or something where you can also have your sex, not sex but the gender changed as well on your passports and things like that as well, and also just letting them know about things like that. But in order for those things to happen, a social worker, the council, they need to actually be knowing about these things and actually be sharing about these things, like information sharing, and actually being proactive in learning about these things and researching into these things, because otherwise they're just gonna, a lot of social workers are gonna be unaware and they're gonna go into it and be like, oh, I didn't even know that existed, like I didn't even know that could happen, I'll have to search that out for you. They'll be unprepared to be able to take on these kinds of like struggles that you've been facing, and you just feel unsupported as a young person or or a child as well. You'd probably be a young person if you're getting all these things changed, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, and also just ensuring that they know about these things, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get the support that you need as well. And also just in general, I would say people just need to know. Social workers also just need to be able to tell young people their entitlements in general, so that they know like, oh, I can get this, I can get that, even if it's a clothing allowance or whatever it is, to be able to change up their style or whatever it is as well. Different things that they need to be telling young people about what they have, because there's a lot of instances where a young person just doesn't know what they're entitled to, and they never really find out until like last minute, and the entitlement they were entitled to is gone, like they're not able to get it anymore. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. So across both of those answers there, a lot around just respecting identity. Thinking about the way that you talk to that young person, but also thinking about the way that you talk about them when they're not in the room as well, which is equally as important. And ensuring that as professionals, we're aware of things like, first of all, terminology, because I have heard a lot of people using really outdated terminology, but then also just like you said, Oliver, ensuring that people know processes in general and that young people are aware of kind of processes and entitlement in general. So thank you both. So in terms, oh, sorry, Oliver, did you want to add one more thing?
I would say like just the reactions as well that sometimes social workers can make as well. So sometimes maybe they will not take you seriously, especially if you are just alone with them. I feel so. That's just something I wanted to put out there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that one, applies to so many different things as well, just in terms of thinking about how do you respond to the young person, how are you hearing what it is that they're sharing with you. So thank you. I think that was a really important addition. And in terms of the questions that we've had in advance, we've got one more left, which is, when social workers make mistakes, how should they seek to rectify these, and what values will they need to do so? And I know that you've both already started giving people some really fantastic practical solutions. So anything else you can think of for this one?
Keegan, would you like to start or should I go?
Happy either way.
You go.
Yeah, so I think for me it's very dependent on the mistake, but I'd say the key element of any situation is to be open to advice or feedback, even if that's negative or whatever manner is expressed, especially from young people. Trying to be calm sometimes when you're expressing you're unhappy is impossible, or at least makes my brain not able to think. I have met social workers who are not open to feedback or try to defend their mistakes, which, whilst again I respect we're all human, I am too, and I don't expect to need to persuade you your mistake needs some form of action, of change, or rethink. Feedback and change is an important part of any relationship. It's how you build trust and connection to someone. It shows you're responsive and want to be the best you can be for that person. I always feel comfortable with anyone when I know I can be honest with them and feedback no matter what. Everything can be learnt from, even if that's a small thing, such as using wrong terminology. You need to show how you'll in the future proactively avoid that mistake. In the case of terminology, is it making a note to remind yourself, or will you do some learning? Because learning doesn't need to take a lot of time. I'm aware how busy we all are, but even a 5-minute video is evidence you've done more than just agree. Even if we believe you, it gives us a reassurance when there is evidence. Another element is, don't assume we should be the help with your mistake. Whilst we may feel it can be beneficial, it's also a lot of responsibility. Think about where else you may get lived experience to help you understand the mistake, or what other knowledge you can gather. If you ask us to explain or how you can do better in the future, make it clear it's not an obligation. I know for me personally, I'm happy to help, but it also can be a lot. Finally, handle mistakes in a timely manner. If it's something you need to go away and fix, be clear on what your plan to handle it is, and what we should do if it's not happened by then. Being in mistake limbo can be an anxiety-provoking time.
Thank you, Tegan. And Oliver, just over to you for that final question. So having to think about when social workers make mistakes, how they're able to rectify them and values they may need to do so.
Thank you. Some of these things will kind of like overlap a little bit, or similar to Tegan's as well. But I would say definitely, yeah. So when they make mistakes, I'll just say like some qualities as well and values as well that we I would say like yeah, it is values and also like qualities that they have. So being accountable, so accountability, putting your hands up to say like, oh yeah, okay, I've done this. I'm sorry if you are actually sorry. And then just moving forward, like what steps are you going to be taking to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future, things like that. I'd also say prevention as well. If you can prevent something from happening, go for it. I would say time management as well. So like making sure that you just prioritize different things as well, especially like trying to prioritize visits as well. Because another mistake that you do make is not visiting people like like I think when it's a child, I believe it's 4 to 6 weeks. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Casey. And then obviously when it's a young person that's leaving care, so 18 to 25, or maybe further if you have like more needs, more complex needs, it would have to be like 6 to 8 weeks as well. Some social workers, even care advisors as well, they don't come to young people that often. So definitely time management and trying to prioritize young people as well, rather than just kind of doing the admin kind of stuff as well. Although that is still important, but the main priority should be young people and their welfare and everything. I'll say eye for detail, so kind of like as Tegan's answers as well in terms of the information sharing too, making sure that, you know, and also as you're adding on Casey as well, just making sure that if there's any like issues with like the paperwork and stuff, making sure you're challenging it, make sure that you're fixing those errors, because obviously we do make mistakes, but making sure that we fix it and everything on time as well. I would say signposting as well, as we touched on, communication, as we touched on. I don't have to say nothing about that, but problem solving as well. It's very, very good for you to just be a good problem solver and also have critical thinking as well, as a social worker. And I'd also say reassuring. So being able to reassure young people of certain things, especially if they come from a background where they've gone through traumatic events, where they maybe struggling to find their identity, especially when they're going through self-discovery and stuff like that. Maybe they are a bit naive in terms of like not being able to figure out the certain things within life and stuff like that. Maybe they are prone to being scammed on certain occasions or whatever it is, just being able to guide them a little bit and just reassure them of different things as well. But those are some values or like qualities I think that social workers should have and be able to show that they do have with young people as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. And we've had one more question in the chat. We've got literally 2 minutes left, so I'll give you both the chance to have a quick think and then to just sort of share brief reflection on that. But the question that we've had is around striking the right balance between oversharing information, which might be confusing or overwhelming for a young child, and then balancing that with kind of undersharing. So how do you strike the balance between kind of not wanting to overshare with children and young people, but then not wanting to undershare as well? And thank you, Marina, for your question.
I think. Oh, do you want to go, Oliver?
Oh no, I just want to ask for clarification, but go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think for me, I guess it's what are we considering oversharing? You know, I think to me, I think we can overthink oversharing or overthinking. I think the important thing is, would you feel confused? So, and I think a lot of things can be put in a child-friendly way more than we think they can be, you know? And actually, I think a lot of children have more of an understanding, but I think it's how it's done as well, because you can share a load of information with a young person and just, you know, come in, splatter it all over, and then like leave again. They're going to be confused because they're just going to have seen you like a whirlwind, dump a load of information on them, and then you've exited. Or are you taking it slowly? You know, you might tell them bits of information, or you might spend a day with them and just over the day share that information, allow them to process, you know, if they want to process it with their toys, or if they want to go to the park and talk to you about it on a swing, you know, whatever way. So I think the how you do it is very important. You know, who else can they talk to about it? You know, is that their foster carers? Is that their parents? Is there someone else, you know, that can help them process information and know how you've shared it to help them, you know, do it over time. And I think that's why it's really important to know that child of how do you make that information accessible to them. But also, I think it is a very hard balance to strike. But as I said, I think most things can be made in a child-friendly way. You know, the example of like actually if there's been domestic violence or some kind of violence of other kinds, actually, you know, don't say violence to a child, but you might just go, oh, mum hurt, you know, grandma, or mum hurt dad. You know, you're making it child-friendly. You know, actually, if you're moving a child to a different placement, you know, you can explain it in very 1 or 2 lines almost of, well, you're currently living here, you know, and you're with X and Y, and you'll soon be living with X and Y because of this reason. So actually, you know, you don't need to give a Pride and Prejudice monologue to this information. How can you make it as simple as possible, but still provide that information? And I think that's my main thing is share everything, but in a child-friendly way and a very simplified way. So as I say, 1 or 2 lines, but actually don't hold things back. I would say on the whole, if you can avoid it, because I think that can become more confusing. It might not be in that moment, but I know there's definitely information held back from me. And then a couple of years later, I'm going, so why was it held back from me? Why was it held back? And saying to me it was going to be confusing and overwhelming isn't a good enough reason, because now I'm sat here overwhelmed and confused. And like, well, that's not good enough. So that'd be my thoughts. Have you got anything to share, Oliver?
Oliver's kindly shared a message in the chat.
Oh.
So definitely create a safe space to let them tell you whether it's too much information for them or not. Make sure you break things down into simple blocks of information and then build on things and teach them certain jargon that's important to learn as a care experienced person that can teach them to advocate for themselves. So thank you, Oliver. And thank you again for your question, Marina. And thank you everyone for coming as well. 45 minutes feels like it went really quickly, but massive thank you mostly to Oliver and to Tegan for your time and your insights.
If I just add quickly.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, sorry. I would just say as well within social work and the local authorities, everything, just try and make sure that you have a national, see if you can build towards a national or even just a one within the council as well, like a policy or something that kind of makes sure that everyone is following the same kind of guidelines around sharing information with certain age groups as well, like with the small blocks as well that I was talking about, and Tegan as well was talking about as well. Just so at least then it's kind of the same kind of practice that you're using throughout everyone, and that kind of equal. But yeah, thank you, and thank you all for coming along as well. I do take care of yourselves.